This hearing from the Director of Public Works, Ms. Bonnie Tewin, who will speak on the Engineer's Office, the Central Service Office, and the Archives in addition to Public Works. Welcome to the committee. Ms. Director, please proceed.
Thank you. Bonnie Tewin, Director of Public Works, Chairman, Council. Thank you for having me. I brought here today with me my Administrator for Planning and Finance, Dan Kozlowski, and also our CPA in our Fiscal Department, Mike Chambers. So when it gets to, as there's any questions where we drill down into the details, either one of those gentlemen can probably answer those. As the other directors has stated, this was a very interesting process and a good process. We'd like to thank OBM for working closely with us on getting these numbers together. I think the first thing, one of the most important things that we need to do is talk about what we did in 2011 and how our budget worked in 2011. This was a learning year for us. It was a time to evaluate what we've done in the past and look at all of our work processes, look at our personnel, look at how we can expedite some of those processes. We also looked at all of our expenditures and looked at what our actual needs are. From that, we reorganized, we reestablished procedures, and then the biggest thing we did was we reprioritized what our work is. That reprioritization is how we came up with the budget for 2012 and 2013. What I like to do is, if you turn to page in your hymnal, V, as in Victor, Roman numeral 5-10, I want to go over the revenues first. Our budgets are a little different in Public Works because most of our revenues that we have in Public Works are self-contained revenues that, for example, in our Road and Bridge Fund, the revenues that we obtain from there are from our license plate tax fee and our gasoline tax fee. Those monies can only be used in those areas. So any savings that we have in operation goes towards the big bricks and mortars of the roads and bridges. So it's not like we can take that money and move it into the general fund for savings. Same thing goes for our sewer assessments. Again, we collect about $20 million a year on sewer assessments. Our budget is showing about $14 million. The money that we do not spend gets put, some of that money is for storm projects for the cities, and then there's a small portion of it is money that was specifically for waterline projects in the local communities. But again, any money that is specifically for sanitary, we spend on our capital projects. So again, for the bricks and mortars as opposed to just the general maintenance. Same thing for our dog license tax fee. That money that we collect in those revenues goes specifically towards running the county kennel. In addition to our parking garage and parking lot fees, all of the monies we collect in those areas are expenditures that we spend specifically on our parking deck and our parking lots with the parking lot attendants and personnel to maintain those areas. The biggest revenue, as you see, which is at 33%, is for space maintenance charges. That is the mail service, the trades, the custodial workers, the utility costs are all charged back to the different departments in those areas. Those are the biggest opportunities where we can see some cost savings. So with that being said, if we go back a page to V as in Victor -9, we can look at what our predicted, our recommended budgets are in each of those areas. If you make a comparison between 2011 and 2012, in most cases, our anticipated budget has been reduced. except for the sanitary engineer division. And again, our revenues are about $20 million in that particular line item. And some of that money, like I said, will be used on storm projects, set aside for storm projects or set aside for water line projects. And then the remaining of that balance would be our capital money that we use for capital projects. Our FTEs, our full-time employees, you can see that there's a reduction from previous years to where we're at now. A lot of those reductions are the temporary trades that we had. Temporary trades we would bring in specifically like to construct this council chambers. What we've done in the trades area is by scheduling and being more proactive, we've taken our temporary trades, or we've taken our trades that we have full-time on payroll, and they're doing the build-outs as opposed to bringing in temporary trades. And in addition, they're still maintaining what they have been maintaining in the past, and we're able to do that through better planning processes, through really asking what our customers want as far as build-outs, laying it out, getting a schedule, and putting that down on paper so they're not pulled in a bunch of different directions, that they can actually concentrate on the work that they're doing. So in essence, and I'm going to keep this kind of short and go more towards the questions, that our budget, a lot of our line items in our budget are reduced from the previous year, and it's not as though those savings can be put back into the general fund, because like I said, those are self-contained revenues and budgets that have to go back into the areas that we're collecting the funds for. So with that, thank you for your time, and I'll take any questions you may have.
Questions by my colleagues? Okay, Councilman Jones. By Ms. Simon.
Mr. Chairman, to Ms. Tewin, good afternoon.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. What is the status of our space maintenance study?
Good question.
We have, our consultant has gone through and collected information, collected data. They're in the process of taking all that information and analyzing it. The final report should be done in the middle of December. There's 3 phases to the project. The first and second phase will be in November. He'll present that to us, but the actual final report will be due to us in December.
Okay,
I'll come back.
okay, Ms. Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, to our director. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. What kind of, I'm looking for your fleet of vehicles. Do you have a number of how many vehicles come under your department?
The Department of Public Works is responsible for maintaining all of the vehicles that belong to Cuyahoga County. We have approximately 364 vehicles, and that consists of, for example, the heavy equipment that our sanitary and our road and bridge departments have, in addition to the sheriff's department has many vehicles for his sheriff. So we're responsible for maintaining those. As a sidebar, we also maintain the vehicles for the marshal's department. Yeah, the marshals. Yeah, the U.S. Marshals. We also maintain their vehicles too.
To our director, so do they pay us a fee for the maintenance?
Yes, they do.
The federal government?
Yes, they do.
Are any of our 360 some vehicles hybrids or electric car? I mean, are we looking toward trying to change our reliance on fuel as we have in the past to invest in other types of vehicles?
I know we have, Mike Chambers, we have one hybrid right now. One of the things we're also trying to do is look at the idling of our vehicles. We have to be careful on that, but because some of the vehicles, the engine has to be running for purposes for the computers on board, but we're trying to find a ways to, cut the idling out and save money on the fuel. That's a study we were trying to undertake here in 2012, look into that a little bit more.
Mr. Chair?
Please proceed.
Thank you. So do we have a plan other than the idling to try to implement and incorporate hybrid vehicles or other types of vehicles? Once we lose a vehicle out of obsolescence, are we looking to replace those with other types of vehicles?
I would say no, we do not have a plan, but that would be something that we would look towards the future at doing. Right now, we're just looking at reducing our overall vehicles down to a much smaller number. And when we look at actually starting to replace those type of vehicles, and again, that's more for the passenger vehicles as opposed to the larger working vehicles. We would look at the possibility of what's the use of those vehicles and if there's opportunities for the hybrid type vehicles. I think that's a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Jones, another question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have you any projections on how much savings we have as a result of the consolidating of buildings?
I would hate to guess at what a number would be. What I do know is of the 25, 30 buildings that we do own, we spend about between security, custodial services, trade service, utilities, we spend about $42 million for those 30 buildings. So there's huge opportunities there for savings, as you can imagine. But I couldn't even guess on what that number would be for savings.
Okay. Chair, are there any other projects? What projects are on the horizon for 2012, 2013?
There's a lot. I think probably the biggest opportunity is where we have savings in our operating dollars. It gives us opportunities to spend those on capital improvement projects. So if you look at our facilities in general, I think there's been some neglect over the years because of the budget crunches that have occurred over the years. And one of the things that we're really taking a good hard look at with our 5-year capital improvement plan is just general maintenance to the buildings that we know we're going to keep. For example, the Justice Center this building right here is not a building that I would consider to be part of the consolidation, that we're going to keep this building. So this is a building that we would look at the preventative maintenance. Our HVAC system, it's working pretty good right now. Our boiler system, we just, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, we just did a major rehab with our own trades over the weekend where we shut down the steam and the cooling system so we could replace some gaskets and some valves in this building. Those are all opportunities that we kind of neglected in the past. But as we look at these things and we say we are going to keep these buildings, we have to do some preventative maintenance, that we're spending more effort and concentrating on those areas for the buildings per se.
Good afternoon, Stan Kozlowski. In terms of some of the capital projects that we'll be doing, for our federal aid program, we'll be rehabbing Snow Rockside Road and Independence all the way over to Broadview Road, Snow Road from West 130th to Ridge Road, Rockside Road from Turney to Broadway, and actually the first piece of a project related to the towpath trail will be done on a Scranton Peninsula parcels. We purchased a couple pieces of land down there. We received $3 million from the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative for that project. It was the largest award of the funding in the United States and Canada out of that grant that came out a couple years ago. And then we also have doing Barrett Road, section of Noble Road in East Cleveland, and working on Snow Road Bridge. So there's some capital projects that will be coming up too, if that's what your question was.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Councilman Greenspan, followed by Councilman Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can get a report from you later on this because this is a pretty in-depth request, but the space maintenance charges, as Councilmember Jones alluded to earlier, the 36 million, that's for each of the next 2 years, 36, 682, 684?
Per year, right? It's per year.
That's 36 per year. I'm sorry, that's
Yes.
what I meant. Okay. Is there a way I can get a breakdown of the detail that makes up those components? And then also, and then also the square footage that we maintain, just so we can kind of understand what we're looking at on
Yes,
a per square foot basis.
I will get that to you. And that's one of the things as this past year, as we looked at what our processes were and where we're spending our money is really drilling down to see where our expenditures are. And it's important because generally speaking, we have 3 different funds. And you have somebody like Stan and even myself who could be working on a road and bridge project at one point, and then an hour later he's working on a sanitary project, and an hour later he's working on a facilities project. It's very important that as we do something as simple as our timesheet, that we make sure that all of those hours gets billed to the appropriate section. And we're lucky, we're honored, we're privileged to have Mike Chambers, a CPA, working in our finance department because he's drilling down into how we bill all of our time and how we identify all of our time so that it gets billed to the appropriate section so that we're not charging everything all to one area. So we do have a very involved process plan, computer program that drills down on just our trades and where they spend their time and in what building. And that's the document that we use to charge back to
So
the other.
when you were saying this wasn't lines on a piece of paper, this was inches thick
Yes.
of documents?
That is correct.
Okay. And just a follow-up question to that, are all the services provided under that category internal sources, meaning we don't outsource? Or do we outsource some of those services?
We do outsource some of the facilities
Okay.
work.
Okay, great. I look forward to receiving that.
Okay. Councilman Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the director, you had mentioned earlier in response to Councilwoman Simon's question about hybrids, which was a good question. I can understand you folks just got here, so past policy was what it was. I'm a little surprised the county was so far behind so many other, the city and the state and so many other people. But regardless, you said that what you mentioned, what I certainly picked up on was that you were focusing on reducing the number of vehicles that you have, and that was intriguing. And I wanted to see if I could draw you out a little more on what you've been doing to reduce the number of vehicles, possibly the use of vehicles, the cost of maintenance and gas for vehicles. Have you found that there was room for reduction there?
Yes, we have, and in fact, I think we have 24 vehicles that are going to auction this year. Those vehicles were selected by department on vehicles where we actually looked at the miles usage on those vehicles. And for example, if there was a department out there that had a vehicle assigned to them and it only had 200 miles this past year on it, we would question whether that vehicle was really needed or not. So we're going through, and that was just the first attempt at looking at where our vehicles, where we can reduce our vehicles. So we started with 24 this year. I think as we drill down further, we can really analyze where the miles are being driven and look at even reimbursables, whether there's an opportunity for reimbursement as opposed to the county owning and maintaining vehicles. And we do, in Public Works, we do have some agreements with some of our unions as far as reimbursements for say, inspectors using their own vehicles.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to the director. That's very interesting, and actually The other day, we had someone in talking, and I asked a similar question, and they had indicated that it was more cost efficient to use the county vehicle, and I was wondering, wanting to wonder, like to see the numbers on that in order to understand that better, because I knew that that wasn't the case across the board. So, I'd be interested in seeing, because you seem to be saying something else.
Well, and it depends how much you use that vehicle. There's a line where those two lines cross.
Okay.
And then it becomes more cost effective to do a reimbursement as opposed to having the county-owned vehicles. An exception to that would be like our trade vehicles. Our trade vehicles are their workshops, basically, where they carry their inventory, their tools and whatnot. Even though they may have vans that have very little miles on them because they're basically driving from 1642 Lakeside to here, there's not a whole lot of miles, but they carry all their equipment, and that obviously in a situation like that, we wouldn't say, we're going to reimburse you for personal miles.
Well, thank you. I guess just in comment, I found over many years that this is an area that is ripe for being able to be reformed. I've also noticed a peculiar sort of phenomena of people who have people who make more money having more privileges, and people who make less having less in regards to the needs for vehicles like this in terms of inspectors in some cases. And also that it just became part of our culture, unfortunately, that these were, a lot of vehicles, for government vehicles, have been seen as perks over the years and taken for granted as something that came along with a good job, was a vehicle to go along with it. And so I think that's something that, given everything else that's going on in the county, that we could do something about. It wouldn't be that complicated.
And I think you and I are on the same page when it comes to that, and Public Works is a perfect example of that. Previously there were vehicles that were for the upper management that were assigned specifically to them, and in some cases they even had take-home privileges. Those have all been eliminated, and even specifically for myself and Stan, we drive our own vehicles, and I mean, we have the ability to request for reimbursement, but we don't because it's more trouble than what it's worth. So I just drive my personal vehicle back and forth.
It is more
here.
trouble than what it's worth,
Yeah,
isn't it?
exactly. So I think that the trend has changed from, the upper administrators having vehicles to, them driving their own vehicles, to the people out in the field having the vehicles, the maintenance workers, the trades workers. Those are the ones that have vehicles assigned to them to do
Thank
their
you very
everyday
much,
work.
Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that, Director.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Director, in the schedule under your department, it includes the engineer, the central services, and the archives. Could you say a little bit about why the engineer's budget was $44+ million in 2011 and $29 million in 2012 and $23.8 million in 2013? And then add a little bit about central services and archives and how they fit into your overall operation.
The explanation, and I asked that same question, is why were we so high in 2011? The simple explanation is these budgets are set up on projects on when they're actually the money is actually encumbered in a particular year. So we have, with our capital programs, which is the biggest dollars, those encumbrances can slide from one year to the next, and if we have an exceptionally large year, it would be included in that particular year. The same thing goes for if we're reimbursing a local community, that the funding is set in the year that the local community invoices us. So it's not an exact science. It's money that can flip from one year to the next, and it's very dependent on the projects, our capital projects that we have.
Okay. And regarding central services and archives?
I guess one of the questions that I had is you had the 3 bullet points as far as archives, central services, and engineering, as opposed to engineering, central services, and sanitary, because those are the 3 main divisions I have, with a separate division of the dog kennel. Why archives is separate, that is a general fund item. That is one of the items that's solely general fund. In addition, if you look at our budget, we have a $4 million budget set up. That includes not only the archives, but risk management, because the county is self-insured. So we're the department that holds the insurance for any accidents that occur. So that budget is specifically set up for that. The archives, as the director first talked about, we hold all of the records. We archive the records. We're trying to get to that point where we're digitizing, microfilming as many records as we can, but there's still a need to have the hard copies. And we are responsible for paying the bill for the underground storage that we have. The company that we use is called Iron Mountain. So we're responsible for taking those documents and paying the bill for the storage of those.
Director, are you saying that after we digitize the records that we're not able to dispose of them, but that they're still shipped out and the physical documents are still saved?
And that's one of the things that Judy Santina is looking at is the proper procedure for destruction of files. There's some debate on what we can and can't destroy after we microfilm them, whether microfilm or digitizing is truly an archival method. So that's something that we're going to be working on in the future, and we have a group that was put together. Is it the Archives Group? Yes. It's the Archives Group, which is a group of people that are discussing exactly those things.
Any other questions? Ms. Simon, and Jones is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the director, with regard to the revenue generated from the sale of dog licenses for the kennel, will there be anticipated funds for a vet and the vet tech at the kennel?
Yes, that's one of the things that we are looking at right now. The money that we collected in revenues in 2011, we have not spent. We've lost some personnel. What I'd like to do is take that money and rather than spending it on a contract for a vet to do the spade and neutering, is to bring in a full-time tech and veterinarian to do those. It's not necessarily a cost savings, but I think what it will allow us to do is have dogs, and you and I talked about this, to have dogs ready to be adopted as opposed to having them be adopted and then do the spade and neutering, and then the dog is actually taken by the new owner. So I think by having these services on staff, it will help expedite the spade and neutering, and will help us to increase the adoptions.
Thank you, Director T1. I just want council to know that this is an extraordinary difference in the past practice. It will enable these dogs to get out of the kennel faster. Right now, we've reached a pinnacle of euthanasia at the kennel due to the foreclosure crisis, the general economy, and some of the way things perhaps were done. They're doing their best, but this will speed up that process to get dogs in and allow dogs to get into cages. So that's much appreciated work. And second, just my last question, and I'll be brief. The juvenile court parking, how is that going? And are we, do we have that self-generating lot up and going yet, where people just pay without that mechanical lot?
Yes, we're working with the court system for people that pay, that work there, that can get the monthly passes, whatever, just like we would at other facilities, but also having a pay station there and working to get that working. So we're handling it both ways. It won't be a manned station like they are in Huntington Park or the Ameritrust, but to have the pay station and then someone would go out there and collect the fees. So we're starting to make that happen.
Mr. Chair?
Please proceed.
When do you think that will be happening?
Yeah, they've been working, I think, last week and the week before, signing people up for the passes.
They're working with one of the court administrators to make that happen, so there's someone on site that can do it for the court personnel. That's what I was told.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
What, if I might, if I can go back to the dog and license fee, what we have in our budget is, as far as our revenue generating, we have a anticipated straight line. We're not showing any increase in our revenues for our dog and license, and with the Top Dog program, which is an awareness for people licensing their dog, we hope that our revenues will increase. We hope also that by concentrating getting more dog wardens out on the streets, that we have an opportunity of increasing our revenue. So even though we're showing it as a flat line in our budget as far as revenue goes, that's a conservative. We hope that it's going to increase over the next couple of years.
Okay.
Mr. Chair? And just a final plug, an ongoing plug for Top Dog. We are in the middle of this contest now and would like council people, if they're available, and we'll talk later about disseminating some of the contest applications to their district schools or to their point people. So we're aggressively trying to get the applications to all the school districts in the county. So we can talk about that later.
Simon, for the benefit of anyone who might be watching on the streaming video, how can someone obtain an application?
Online, on our website, there's applications for Top Dog, which is an essay contest for elementary school children, grades 1 through 5, and they can write up to 50 words why their dog or a dog they know is the top dog in the county. And part of that essay contest will bring in a few winners who will then be receiving an award at our county kennel in November, I think, and then the top dog will actually have their license. Their dog will have number 1. So I don't know if people know that the dog licenses are all numbered, and will win perhaps their canine unit dog to go to their school. So it's very exciting that we're doing this here in Cuyahoga County to not only raise awareness about licensing dogs, but about the importance of spay-neuter. So that's going to be incorporated in, and our licenses now have a differential. There's a discount, a small discount for dogs that are actually neutered or spayed. So that's part of the awareness. So we all hope we can get as many kids as possible to participate.
Great. Thank you very much. Councilman Jones, followed by Council President Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In our contracting ordinance, we added language to help small businesses gain more access to county work. Our language says something to the effect the county shall consider dividing contracts to increase the potential pool of bidders without impacting the cost. You mentioned a little earlier in your department about the temporary workers. Were you able to reach the spirit of that language through taking, I guess, part-time work or additional work? Instead of hiring temporary employers, you contracted it out. Tell me a little bit more about that. How many contracts were you able to put out, and just speak to that a little?
Well, and that's exactly the reason why I'd like to get away from using the temporary trade, so we can do some of this contract work, the smaller type of build-outs. We haven't done any of those smaller contracts yet. We're still trying to get our hands wrapped around the actual process. So we have to get a project from the beginning of the scoping process. When somebody comes to us and say, I'd like to do this particular work, say at Jobs and Family Services, they want to have a build out, to start it from the very beginning. And we hand it to Stan. Stan looks at the funding opportunities, look at what's the actual scope of the work and how we would go about getting that work completed. We get our maintenance trades involved. They look at it. Do we have the time to do this in the time frame that our customer is requesting it to be done? Can we do it with our own trades, or do we contract it out? And it gets into the here's our process that we want to go through, and you're exactly right. By not bringing in these temporary trades, that it gives us an opportunity to contract some of this work out. We haven't done it yet because we haven't got that first project under our belt yet. We've started right at step one. Unfortunately, we've started with a lot of these projects where it's handed to us in step 8 of 10, so we're trying to catch up, and that's where we're at right now. But you're exactly right. That's what the vision is.
You have a sense of when you think that will start?
I would say in 2012, we're going to do some of those smaller projects and contract them out. Again, I want to give our trades in-house an opportunity to bid on those types of projects. But again, they have their general maintenance work. They have other works. We have a lot of work that we have to catch up on that's been neglected over the years. If they can't perform that work in-house, then we're going to be contracting it out.
Yeah. I'd like to know a little about how the county stat has been going, particularly in regards to the sewer village, and have you been able to maximize the fees? And tell me, does the rainfall we've gotten impacted, and does that impact the monies generated?
Yeah, one of the biggest impacts with the rainfall that we've had this year is the amount of overtime that our crews had to work in the sanitary division. We like to control our overtime, obviously, as best we can. But when we have these catastrophic rain events, it's all hands on deck as far as, getting to our customers, getting in the homes, resolving some of their flooding issues. So if you look at our budget this year, our overtime budget is a little higher than we expected. But in our business in Public Works, because we're at the mercy of Mother Nature, whether it be the rains for the sanitary division or in our snow and ice removal over in Olmsted Township, that impacts us. So we kind of have to understand that there's going to be peaks and valleys. The good part about Public Works being not just sanitary being all by itself, but Public Works consisting of roads and bridges, sanitary and central services, it gives us an opportunity that we have 600 employees that we can tap into in these types of Mother Nature events that, we're not just picking from the sanitary guys who are over and over and over again, always working the overtime because there's so much rain, but we're talking to the unions now about transferring some of our road and bridge guys over to the sanitary division to help out in those particular situations. So I think those discussions are going very well, and I think whoever came up with the brainchild of making Public Works consist of road and bridges and sanitary all under one roof, and even central services, that it was a good idea, understanding that we have the luxury and the ability to transfer those staffs, beyond those what used to be silos. We're now one big happy family.
Mr. Chair, my final question, just a follow-up. County stat, I'd like to know a little more about that. Has that been capturing everything you just said? Have you had meetings about the county stat? Or?
Actually, one of the really good telltale measures that we have in county stat, and we have a bunch of measurements that we do a lot in Public Works, and we're engineers, so we could probably measure 2,000 different things and present it if we had to. I won't do that to you, but one of the true measurements that I think is a good example of our productivity is our productivity rating that we use with our sanitary crews. When Bob Kleibert first became the sanitary engineer, they looked at the number of hours that the crews were charging to municipalities. From 2003 to 2007, they increased the productivity. They increased the amount of hours that they actually billed to the community, so that there wasn't just this idle time that wasn't billed to anything. They went from crews that used to consist of 3 people down to crews, 2-persons crews, which ended up saving the community's money. They were getting the same amount of work done, but they were doing it with 2 people rather than 3 people. So our productivity rating, what we have that we present to the county executive on a quarterly basis, is we look at all of the different crews, whether it's our TV crew, whether it's our jet crew, whether it's our house crew, and we look at the billable hours for each of those crews. And we try to maximize that as much as possible. And if you most of our crews are working 10-hour days. They work 4 10-hour days. So if we look at that 10 hours and we subtract out their lunch, subtract out their breaks that they're required to by the union contract, cleanup time, and travel time, we have an hour, and I think it's 6.5 hours that we're trying to actually sit down and produce, not sit down, or actually produce. We're actually, jetting out a sanitary sewer, whatnot. So that's our goal. And we actually measure each one of those crews. And we can tell, where we're doing good, where we're not doing so good. If we have somebody out on sick leave for whatever, those productivity hours go down. So we're really monitoring each crew and the productivity of each crew. And that's why it's so important that we have somebody like Mike that's behind the scenes adjusting all those numbers on the payroll side, so that everything is accountable and we know exactly what our guys are doing and where the expenses are for each one of those.
Thank you.
Okay. Council President Conley.
I just wanted to put in a plug for the archives, because I was on the advisory committee, and I think I'm now on the Records Commission for the county. But the archives is really the history of our county. I mean, it's amazing. We should probably all take a tour there. You can go there, and there's people doing genealogical research. I actually used it when I was doing working on some historical research. And so when we had the 200th anniversary of the county, we were able to pull up records, from the first ordinance ever passed in the county. So it's really important that we maintain the archives for the history, so that 200 years from now, when they have another anniversary of our founding, and that historians and people will be able to go back and look at the records. So we have all those records housed over in the Rhodes House, and there's pros and cons there, but it's really a viable institution. They have a little lecture series on the weekends, and I think I'm speaking there with Judge Griffin about the Kennedy assassination in November. They have one this week on some Civil War topic, I forget. But it really is a viable institution. It's important that we maintain that for the history of our county.
Well stated. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will now move on to the world of information services. The information services will be presented by the director, Mr. Jeff Mowry. Thank you very much. Welcome to the committee.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me. Jeff Mowry, Chief Information Officer for the ISC Department. At your request, we put together a quick PowerPoint slide that goes through the summary of our current base budget. Specifically, is that better? Specifically talks to some of the changes that we've made in IT capital planning. So this is the first time ever, I think, at Cuyahoga County that we've actually done a 5-year rolling IT capital plan. And the goal of this 5-year capital plan is to have a consistent rollover every 5 years. So with that, I'll get into it.
And Mr. Director,
Yes, sir.
did you send this to the clerk?
Yes. Well, I sent it to the request that came out from council on Friday. It came
Okay,
from
Trevor,
George.
could you put it out on the S drive for us so that we all have it? Thank you. We have it?
You should have a hard copy in front of you.
Yeah, but we also want the permanent electronic, so we can refer to it. Okay.
Not a
Thank you.
problem. Okay, so a little bit where we started, when I came here in April, our first quarter forecast for 2011, we were approximately $639,000 in the red. We were actually over budget, overspending in IT. We've since been working on that. In the second quarter, we were projecting about $81,000 over budget in IT. And I'm happy to report that we now have a balanced budget. We have a small surplus that we're reporting for 2011. We've been tracking our savings to date since I came. And some of these savings that I have on the list are more even opportunity cost savings. Just for example, as many of you that are on the Board of Control process, we have a significant amount of IT maintenance contracts here. We have over 160 maintenance contracts. Oftentimes, we have IT vendors that want to increase their maintenance fees year after year. This year, for example, we had one vendor that wanted a 30% pay increase. We spent a considerable amount of time trying to negotiate those back down to an acceptable level. We have juvenile justice center as an example. We had ordered some equipment, and we looked at a different IT strategy for the juvenile justice center that included reusing equipment that we had and just configuring it differently. So we were able to save about $233,000 on that. So that's really, we're tracking about $1.3 million in savings so far. When you look at IT spend here in the long term, there's even more longer term savings I think that we can have to the enterprise, not just my budget alone. For example, the print management contract that we recently approved, we're in process of rolling that out. We think conservatively, we feel that once we have that in place, we could save $2 to $3 million over the life of that 5-year contract just by reevaluating the way that we do print today. So that's just an example. I have some TBDs. I want to talk to you about enterprise resource planning. And this is really a concept that's happening a lot in local governments, state governments, and it's been happening in the private industry for some time, looking at how we plan our resources from an enterprise perspective. And then the third one is just in the data center optimization, looking at how we manage our data today, looking at managing the infrastructure today. We feel that there's significant long-term savings in this area as well. This is just the slide. It's a summary of the current ISC budget. In 2011, we were at 15.7 million. In 2012, we're at 15. In 2013, we're showing a slight increase to 15.7 million. The big changes that I wanted to talk to you about is in this capital area. In 2012, we're requesting 2.7 million in capital with a potential increase to 12.7 million in capital in 2013. So I've got more slides that's going to talk specifically to the capital planning, and again, it's viewing how we spend our IT dollars differently than we have in the past. And this is a breakdown of where our IT funding of the 15 million goes today. As you can see, a majority of it is personnel, 19% in contracts, and in communications, about 16%. This is our telecom, data, and voice expenses. What I want to do is spend a little bit more time talking about IT capital planning. Again, our goal is to have a 5-year reoccurring IT capital plan that's consistent so that I think we can plan as an organization. You can kind of expect, we know that computer equipment has a life expectancy to it, that we have a consistent rollover year after year. And the second one is to really talk a little bit about what's made in a public comment earlier today, and is viewing technology as to how we can enable transparency, efficiency, and even regionalization for shared services. And then again, the third one is a consistent 5-year hardware plan that's based on virtualization, which is a common IT concept or IT process that's been out there for some time. This is looking at virtualization. Basically means you're not ordering as much computer hardware, computer servers as you did in the past. In the past, every time a new system came on board, whether it be a new animal care system or a new juvenile justice center, you would buy the software and the server with it. This virtualization is basically putting more pieces of software on common hardware, reducing your overall cost. And then the cloud options is looking at where in the future do we need this amount of data center and this kind of capacity here at the county? Could we put some of this information in the cloud or an external data center? So the IT capital planning for 2012, again, we were looking at 2.8 million. In 2013, a jump up to 12.6. The first one being replacing 500 desktops and PCs, monitors, and software. The second one being replacing about 250 laptops. The third one being replacing some of our age servers that we have here today. They're getting up in age. Upgrading our Cisco Call Manager system. Replacement of communication devices. And communication devices we define as devices that actually sit and run on the network. This is hardware. This is the wireless access points that you're using today, switchers and routers that connect us. Replacing some of our storage area network. We talked a lot today about electronic scanning and archiving. This is capacity to give us to do that more effectively. The big one, I've got some more slides on this, is talked about a countywide ERP system, an integrated real property appraisal system, video conferencing equipment. Today we have about 50 pieces of video conferencing equipment throughout the county. Those are all remotely managed today, which means every time we have to make a change, we have to send a tech out to make the change to that equipment. This is looking at making some small hardware investments to centralize it. And then additional storage for our current security network and video equipment. When you come into the buildings today, you see that we're recording on the security cameras those videos, and we're starting to fill up. So we'd like to buy some additional hardware to store the videos. For 2011 and 2012, this is for the questions that were around county stat. This is a slide that we created to talk about what we're trying to do to build a better IT here in Cuyahoga County. So when we look at the projects that we're doing on this list and projects that we take on general, we always want to make sure that they have 5 focus areas. The first one being transparency, the second one being IT consolidation, the third one being efficiency, not just efficiency in IT, but efficiency in the organizations that we support. The fourth one being regionalization. You know, what IT projects are we doing that could be have a regional impact? And the fifth one is standardizations and customer satisfaction. We want to make sure that the IT projects that we're doing have a customer satisfaction goal related to them. So slide 6 is to talk a little bit specifically about the hardware only. This is our current state of hardware. Today we have a fleet of 2,761 non-state desktops. So the state provides human services desktops. These are the ones that the county funds and operates. 1,400 of those are older than 5 years of age. So we're starting to have an issue with PCs getting older in the fleet, or getting older. We have a fleet of 716 laptops out there today. 265 of those are older than 5. We have a fleet of about 294 servers. 141 of those are older than 5 years of age. This is the communication devices we talked about. We've got about 450 communication devices. About 293 of those are older than 7 years of age. If you look at the hardware in the past, we've always just ordered kind of as required, as needed. Agencies would come forward and order PCs and laptop and equipment. There really wasn't any strategic thought. I mean, we tried to do our best to standardize, but with this new approach, is we wanted to try and take advantage of larger spot buys, and also taking advantage of some standards around what we're buying in the future. Our data storage environment today, currently it's about 7 years old. About 2 months ago, we had a significant hardware failure there. We lost our payroll system for about 2 weeks. Our storage on payroll, yeah. So we know that we need to make some investments in this equipment. And I talked to you before, I mentioned that the video conference equipment is not centrally managed today, and we would like to look at improving that. So we're pretty conservative, recognizing the state of the budget. We didn't replace, for example, all 1,400 of the desktops. We're replacing half of those. We're just doing 500, which would include PCs, monitors, and software, replacing up to about 150 laptops. We have 100 laptops identified for our Children and Family Services area today. We're still working with them, but for example, today in Children and Family Services, a lot of our caseworkers go out to the field with paper or their own personal cell phones, and they take data about clients, and they have to go back into the office and key the data back in. So we wanted to see if we could have some automation improvement in that area. So this is some additional capital money to help in this project in this area. So the rest of these are consolidate the age servers, helping upgrade our telecom system today. So that's, without getting into too much detail on the hardware, this is basically the fundamentals of the hardware requests that we're asking for. The next one is a little bit larger investment. Slide 7 represents, when I came here in April, we took a look at the fiscal office. And if you look at the fiscal office, we are currently consolidating the treasurer recorder's office. We went through and looked to see where was there any system documentation around all of the systems that operate in the fiscal office, and we had a hard time finding it. So we've been going through and doing a system documentation, which is what you see in the upper quadrants. So if you look at the current state of our fiscal systems today, we've got multiple legacy systems in the financial office. They're about 20 years old. Many of the systems were installed back in the early 80s, late 70s. A lot of the technology is very mainframe based. The systems today are maintained by consultants. The systems are going to require future upgrades. We know that we're going to have to do some upgrades here. So we wanted to take a quick look at doing those upgrades. Excuse me, I've been fighting a cold. Today we have multiple financial processing going across the agencies. If you look at what was presented today, I think you saw that we had financial discussions about a lot of the budgets that were coming through the systems. So when you take a look at what we're actually spending in the current system cost today, we're about $3 million a year annually in our systems cost. What we're recommending is an investment in some professional services to help take us through each one of those purchasing payroll systems. We'd like to align the technology to the process redesign. Thank you. We'd like to go through and evaluate an ROI, a return on investment, with each one of our systems. I think we could take an opportunity here to look at this process as being a regional shared service initiative throughout the region. So our goal for 2012 is to finalize the strategy in these systems in this area is to maintaining the systems, upgrading the systems, or replacing the systems. Okay? In the integrated real property appraisal board of revision systems, today, as we've discussed, we are consolidating the auditor, the recorder, and the treasurer's office. Currently today, we have 8 systems that's in the auditor, recorder's, treasurer's system. They're about 12 years of age. The Manatron system is our main system there. It's been having some very poor performance issues. And if you look at the way Manatron processed our tax system today, it can take up to a weekend to process jobs. The functionality does not appear to meet the demands for the agency in this area. There was an RFP conducted in 2009 that was actually put on hold. The RFP, when it came back in 2009 to replace these systems, was anywhere from $5 million to $15 million. Our maintenance cost in this area is about $1.5 million a year. Our recommendation is to review the detailed business process and consolidate of the systems and the workflow. So what we want to do is take a look at all the systems in this area, look at the processes tied to it, and put together a common RFP. If we need to look at replacing the Manatron system, we should look at how these systems work together as a total from an enterprise perspective. So our goal for 2012, again, we can continue just to maintain these systems as we have in the past. We can look at upgrading them, or we can look at replacing them. All right. What we did is I went through and we outlined in the capital improvement the list of major projects, replacing the 500 desktops, replace the 250 laptops, replace and consolidate the aged servers, upgrade the Cisco call manager system. And what we did is we went through and we aligned these systems to each one of our 5 major objectives. So transparency, IT consolidation, efficiency, regionalization, and standardization and customer satisfaction. So we went through and actually tried to put a check mark as to how each one of these projects related to those main objectives. Okay? So with that, I'll take some questions from you.
Mr. Director, can you tell us of the $2.8 million in capital expenditure recommended for 2012 and the $12.7 million recommended for 2013, is any of that currently incorporated into the budget as proposed here? And if so, can you show us where that shows up?
No, this is above and beyond the current budget. I mean, this is in the budget request, in the current budget request, but this in the past had never been in my ISC budget for 2011, if I understood your question.
So none of this is currently in the budget, but you're requesting that this be added to the budget?
No, it's in the capital budget.
It's in the capital budget. Okay.
Right.
And is there a plan in place on what the funding sources would be?
I guess Director Rubino could help me answer that.
Matt Rubino, Office of Budget Management. Mr. Chairman, to your question, these items are separate. They're in the CIP, the capital piece. They're not in the operating budget. For year one, the 2012 request, we think a lot of these are one-time upgrades to smaller hardware, such as laptops, computers, and potentially could be a good use of our excess reserve. As you noticed in our roll-up report for the general fund, we do have money set aside, have had money set aside for automation. So that is one potential use for those funds. Has not been determined yet. For some of the larger pieces of equipment, the servers and the telecommunications related equipment that has a useful life over 5 years, we would most likely use bond funding with our other capital improvements for those items for the 2012 list of stuff. In the past, we have used bond funds. We used to have Centrex and telephone equipment. Now it's fiber optic and routers. So really we're sticking with the past practice for the items that have a larger use or longer useful life. For 2013, most of the items there that are related to systems, whether it's real property or the costs associated with the ERP, and we'd be looking at some form of long-term financing. It may not be bonds, it may be lease, it could be some form of a loan, but for the most part, those systems, whether they're 10 million or more, to implement those, we have to go with some form of long-term financing. For real property, that system, it has a separate funding source, real estate assessment fund and the DRETAC fund, so you could utilize or leverage the dollars there if you did some form of long-term financing for the real property system. ERP is a different story. We'd have to look at some form of county-wide long-term financing approach. I don't know what that is yet. But I think for the upfront cost, especially when it comes to the laptops, the computers, and the equipment, we're either going to use existing resources or include it in our next round of debt issuance.
Okay, questions by my colleagues? Councilman Greenspan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Maury, could you talk a little bit, you and I have had conversations about technology,
Sure.
on the regionalization concept of how we would be able to invest in software, as an example, that we may be able to share in some of the costs with some of our communities if they so chose to participate in our applications.
Sure. Probably, if you look at the, for example, in the fiscal office, if you look at the way we're managing financials, HR, purchasing, and payroll, there's a lot of local communities that have went together in the past to look at common RFPs to share this type of software investment. In Florida, Hillsborough County and City of Tampa Bay went together and actually purchased, or have an RFP out on the street to actually purchase the software and use it as co-sharing. There's some communities up in Minnesota where they're actually running the financials for smaller communities that don't have the full-time staff that are capable. I know that a lot of municipalities I've heard here in the region have part-time finance people on staff with not a lot of expertise in this area. So I think that if we were to embark, if it makes business sense to replace all of our financial systems, that we do that investigative look to see if there's be some regional opportunities to either share with municipalities or offer it up as a shared service initiative today. We're doing some of this already today in IT. We're doing shared services for website maintenance and development. We're doing it for voice over IP. We have some communities that we've been doing open enrollment systems, but this is really taking it to the another level and looking at where we could share in finance, HR, payroll, time and attendance collection.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Chair, there's another opportunity here that Mr. Maury and I have talked about, and has to do with the fact that there is no countywide land use plan, as an example, which makes it very difficult from a collaborative perspective for communities, even adjacent communities, to understand what's going on within the neighboring community. But also from an economic development perspective, it hampers an overall perspective for the county to understand what's available. And one of the opportunities would be to offer a countywide GIS system whereby each of the 59 communities would have access to their own community, as an example. They would use it as their primary GIS system. The county then would get the benefit of having the opportunity to have visibility to those communities, but also as an adjoining community or as an adjacent community would make a modification to its land use plan, your home community would understand. So community A and community B makes a land use plan adjustment that's on the border. Community A would get a notification that a land use plan modification has been made. Once again, just fosters communication, it fosters collaboration, especially on the economic development front. I think it would be very wise for us to look seriously at allocating resources when the time is appropriate, when Director Maury says it's appropriate, or we mandate by policy that it is. But that's just an example of how technology can aid us right now in an area that we're not even really thinking about at a granular level, but we understand conceptually from a 50,000-foot level that we need to talk about regional and economic collaboration, and technology is a prime driver in making that happen. So it was just a comment, not a specific question, but something for us I believe we should keep in mind.
If you look at this capital improvement plan that we have, even though when it comes to replacing the desktops and simple things like laptops, it's not our intent in our organization to spend a lot of technical time developing standards around what kind of PC should we purchase in the future. The state of Ohio has a large IT technical staff that does that today. It's out on their website. You can go and look, and you can see what their recommendations are for computer purchases. So we want to take advantage of those opportunities. We don't want to have to reinvent the wheel here. But if we're going to go out and buy desktops in larger larger groups like this or larger spot buys, there's no reason why we couldn't engage municipalities to help us participate in that type of a structure as well. So I think as, you know, if we can get the capital improvement plan approved, as you said, there's opportunities, I think, for regionalization as it relates to these items on the list.
Mr. Chair, one question. On the GIS system,
Yeah.
in our budget book, it talks about in 2012, 2013 target of 50%, looks like completion. And in 2011, it was 50%. Do we get to 100% here? Is that 50 plus 50 equals 100?
I think some of that in 2013 is we need to go back and update all our aerials.
Okay.
So we need to actually go back in 13 and take some additional photos, and there's some additional money set aside in 13 to do that work.
Okay. All right, great, thank you.
Questions by my colleagues? Councilman Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just if I missed this, I'm sorry, but what is the general timeline, not for the bulk of this capital improvement, for the bulk of this?
Well, for 2012, we you know, the 2.8 that we're looking for, you know, we would like to start, we would have to go through an RFP process. For example, on the ERP project or the treasurers, the integrated real property system, we would want to go through an RFP process to help us spec out that system and spec out those efficiencies. You know, the RFP process here, as you know, it can be quite time consuming. So you're probably talking 3 to 6 months of just getting through the RFP process, which is why we shifted most of the workload into the 2013. For example, you'll see in the countywide ERP system, for example, the 2013 $6 million is kind of an estimate at this time. Until we really go through the RFP process and understand our requirements, would we be able to really get a true number for 2013?
I know that this kind of thing is never complete. In a way, but in terms of what you're looking at, I mean, in terms of you've come into the community, and we're glad to have you and all that. What kind of a timeline do you see on, you know, completion of your main tasks here?
Well, for these systems that we have, specifically the large one, the ERP and the integrated real property system, you really would spend most of 2012 doing that deep dive assessment, going through and looking at where do we do financial, for example, just taking that one, the financial transaction today. How many people here in the county do accounts payable processing? How many do accounts receivable? In human services, for example, and in public works, you kind of heard it today, there's some financial activity going on in those organizations. This would we would want to spend time in 2012 flushing out that detail, flushing out those process redesigns, and then going out for quote for a system to replace it, and you would start in 2013. If that makes sense.
No, it's okay.
You know, I would be, you know, I'd request, Mr. Chair, you know, we could put together some timing as to when actually the more detail around when the budget would hit as it relates to timing, if that would be helpful.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well, taking Mr. Scipione's suggestion that we view this as an investment,
Yeah.
my question is, do you have any information yet in terms of what kind of operating savings we could expect to achieve and how we would achieve them if we make some of these investments in the physical and software capabilities?
Well, on the hardware only, these specifically in the hardware, you know, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, we need PCs, we need hardware to run the business. So this is just looking at getting on a technology replacement cycle with the hardware. So really, it's tough to put hard dollars on some of the hardware savings. When we start looking at larger hardware, software investments and projects like enterprise resource planning and integrated real property board of revisions, there would be, some technology savings obviously related to this, but there's bigger process potential savings. I'm a little reluctant this early in the game to throw out saving numbers or how much we think we could save. I can tell you on what we're spending today, just on the technology side. On the ERP, we've done an analysis. We're spending close to $3 million a year just to maintain those legacy old systems today. We're spending about $1.5 million on a mainframe system that we're running today. If we were to look at a more updated, more advanced system, we could obviously, I think, lower our technology cost savings. But if you couple the technology savings with process savings, I think it could be substantial.
Mr. Director, I think this is going to kind of be an ongoing issue, and I think it would be helpful if you could kind of work on developing some numbers in this area. We have a lot of options around areas where people say with good documentation that if you spend money on this now, it'll save you a lot of money down the road, and anywhere from IT areas to early childhood to prisoner diversion and a lot of things, and we're going to have to make some decisions as to how we allocate scarce resources. That's what the budgeting process is all about. So I would encourage, and not all these decisions are going to be made between now and December 13th. This is going to be a long-term ongoing process, but I think that in investing some time and effort in trying to develop some reasonably good information as to what the potential benefits would be of various kinds of investments, I think that would be helpful to us.
Sure. These are large IT investments, large process redesign investments. Obviously, that's, I think, why in the past the county has such aged systems. Really, there hasn't been this investment or this look before. I think this is a great opportunity for us in 2012, really to spend a small amount of money to do the detailed assessment to get us ready for a larger spend in 2013. At this juncture, just being here 6 months, it's very difficult to do this kind of a detailed assessment on my own. We would need a little bit of help. Okay.
Well, I would assure you that I'm a long-term planning and investment kind of person, and I believe in that. But I also think that it does need to be data-driven, and that we need to have some pretty good information on what we think is most likely to happen if we make certain kind of choices, and I think that information will help us make those choices. And when you're talking about the kind of dollars that we're talking about here, I think it's particularly worth the time and the cost needed to generate some good data to help us make some decisions. Questions by my colleagues. Councilman Rogers.
You pretty much touched on what I was going to say, but as way of an example, I'm just looking at the 100 laptops for Children and Family Services, and I'm assuming those are for social workers that have to do home visits and
Right.
things of that nature. So having them use laptops or even iPads or whatever, for that matter, seems to me that it would speed up their work.
Right.
And also from a management side, you're able to instantly process what's been done. Even with GPS features on those devices, you can, immediately tell if a person has gone to the home that they were supposed to go to that day. And so kind of trying to put a number around where are those actual savings, if they're able to increase their productivity as a result of having this laptop as opposed to the paper, is the kind of thing that I'd like to be able to see if we can quantify that.
Yeah, I mean, that coupled with, that's the detailed analysis that we need to do is really spend some time and understand if we introduce that kind of automation to that work environment, what impact does that have? And we feel that it'll be significant. This is one item that came out through the county stat program. I sit on the county stat, I attend every meeting that they have. For me, we are a service organization for IT, so it's important for us to understand what the needs of the agencies are. And this is one that was highlighted through the county stat program, that this was a very inefficient process.
Just while we're on it, and I don't want to spend time, but and you may or may not know the answer to this, but do you know if our appraisers that are going out appraising the homes, are they using paper or do they have some type of automated?
I believe there's some automation there. John, do you know?
Right now it's paper.
It's all paper?
And then it's brought back in-house, it's data entered, and it's corrected, rechecked,
Mm-hmm.
field, and these things are ready to come back out. So the process could be automated, so it's a quick one-line stream.
Right. They have a lot of properties to look at.
530,000.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Councilman Jones.
Kind of a big picture, but
It's hard to get across in, 15 minutes to a half hour. It's a big initiative.
I've heard that there are programs from the state that maybe employment, family services, maybe even children, family services, that those programs come from the state, so you can't really consolidate those.
Well-
But is there a way, and it's bigger than the county, but would there be savings if there was some type of consolidation of the state programs and our county programs?
Yeah, and I've personally been to Columbus twice now, and I've met with the state is somewhat decentralized too. They have CIOs for human services and CIOs for infrastructure. I've met with both of them to do just kind of what you're talking about. One is what could we leverage that they as an organization have from an IT perspective? What could we leverage and not reinvent the wheel for here, number one. The second area is in human services in particular. The state has mandates that we use specific systems that they have, but yet we still, as a county, maintain our legacy systems because their state systems doesn't do what they need to do to solve our agencies. So we've sent to the state our list of what it is we would like to see them do so that we can reduce our cost here at the county and push more of that work to the state. That's one thing that we've done. I think that if you look at the way some of those state systems work in human services, by applying some hardware such as desktop or PCs or tablets, that data is easily accessible through the web today anyway. So without a lot of effort, we can have some, I think, immediate, quick improvements. Hopefully that answers it.
Mr. Chairman, and you mentioned you couldn't speculate on dollar amounts and savings, but when you talk about your aged servers and the mainframes, where is that physically located? Is there a central location for these?
Well, that's a bit of a problem for us too. We are centrally located at the Sterling Building, which is on Euclid and 13th.
Unfortunately, that building is out of power. So in other words, we would have to make more investment in that. That's a leased facility. We don't own that. If you look in our budget, there's a line item. It's about $1 million a year just for the lease. Plus we pay power for that building on top of it. But we're out of power there. So that means I cannot take servers out of human services or public works and put them into that central spot, which is what we'd like to do.
And is the vision to contract all of that server machinery and all of those things into the cloud technology you've been talking about?
If we take a look at doing some of these larger investments, for example, in the ERP project, when we put that project out for quote, we would like to look at that as an option. I think we have to take it, in some cases, opportunity by opportunity. I don't think it makes sense to just blanketly outsource it all. I think it makes sense that we take a look. If we were to do a project like this, if we host it in the cloud, what's the return on investment as compared to hosting it here?
We have an impact of $480,000 in the 2012 budget for the servers. Does that mean you contract out a portion of it? Is that what
we
give you
would
that type of savings?
We would look at buying servers that have that virtual capability I talked about to try and reduce our overall operating cost.
And in time, is the goal to be able to provide cloud service to other municipalities?
That could be a good, if it makes business sense for us. We're really not quite that mature yet in this space. I would say we're mature in the work that we've been doing so far, which is hosting and maintaining their websites and doing some limited telephone support. If we were to take on more, I think we would have to have a much more maturity in the ISC organization as it relates to service desks, service calls in this area. So for example, if we contracted with, I'd just make a city A, XYZ, and to do more application support, we would need to make sure we have a good service desk, a support desk for them to call and they had problems, we were able to respond to it. We're not there yet. Does that make sense?
Ms. Conwell.
To the chair, to the director, when is the lease up on the building, on the Sterling building?
There was a 10-year lease signed before the new administration and new government took office. As I understand it, it's a 10-year lease.
So you're saying the county exec just signed a 10-year?
No, it was signed, I think, with the new, the old government. It was signed. It was signed before you guys and Ed took office.
So do you know how many years we have left on that lease?
9. It was just signed.
Oh, it was just signed.
Yeah. However, according to the legal review, we have a 3-year out, so we can get out of that building in 2013.
Because you stated something regarding the power, so I'm not understanding that. That means they have no power in that building?
It's an odd lease. I've never seen an IT lease like this before. It's a lease. It's not all we do is rent the building. In a typical data center outsource, I think kind of like Councilman Jones was asking about, if you were going to outsource a data center, you would outsource the services around it. So this lease is basically, we are paying for the building. If we need to make any capital improvements to it, such as adding more power, fire system, fire alarms, air conditioning, the county has to pay for it.
So you're working on a plan, since you stated we could get out in 3 to 4 years. I'm sure you're contemplating on that, how you can.
We've been actively working on it. The Director of Public Works, Bonnie, had mentioned the study that's ongoing, the real estate study. We have funneled our IT requirements into that study. I have the county executive started a loan executive program here, And I have a loan executive with me currently from Fifth Third Bank who's an expert in data center. And he's been helping us put together our list of requirements. If we were to move in 2013, what would we need to move? I'd be happy to have you over and take a look at that building if you'd
small.
like. Yeah.
I believe when you met with council before, you stated it did not fit the needs.
Yeah, it's an aged facility. It doesn't have a solid fire suppressant system in it. We would need to make some capital investment under the current lease agreement if we wanted to stay there for long term.
One follow-up question. We have other services there too as well, right?
Yeah, the HR department is on the 3rd floor and we're on the 4th floor. It's the other issue we have with it is we pay unmetered power, so we just pay like an average. So I don't have true electrical cost through that lease agreement. So for example, like at your house, I'm sure you'll get a meter report and you can see exactly what you're spending. We don't have that kind of detail. That's why I said it's not a typical IT lease agreement like I've seen in the past.
Okay.
CCOMS is also on the 1st floor of that building.
Thanks, Gene.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, we are now moving into a series of budgets in which we have far less control over their operations. And I would ask my colleagues I would ask presenters to be brief and for colleagues to really focus on budget questions, and that particularly applies to the Board of Elections, where I know that we could spend all afternoon and evening talking about operational issues regarding elections. Please don't do that. And I now call forward Jane Platten to present for the Board of Elections.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We hope you're thriving on chaos.
Well, for the last 4 years I have, anyhow. Thank you. My name is Jane Platt, and I'm the director at the Board of Elections. I have with me today our Deputy Director, Pat McDonald, and our Fiscal Officer, Marvin Davies. The Board of Elections is the largest voting jurisdiction in the state of Ohio, and it's the 13th largest in the United States. We currently serve 885,563 registered voters in 1,066 precincts within 437 voting locations. We employ 99 full-time unclassified employees, and we have a 4-member board. We obviously provide election services to all candidates, committees, municipalities, townships, school districts, and voters within the county. I thought it was important to talk about what drives our budget, and it's non-traditional in terms of every other county agency. Because each year is operationally different at the Board of Elections, it's the nuance of the 4-year budget cycle that drives our agency's fiscal needs. Odd years represent municipal elections, mayors, councils, school boards, and municipal judicial elections. And although all cities have elections in odd years, not all offices appear in each election due to the staggering of terms. Every city, with the exception of Cleveland and Westlake, stagger their council or mayoral terms by 2 years. And so it's only every 4 years that you'll actually see a spike in our municipal election resource needs, and that is when Cleveland and Westlake have elections. Even-yeared elections up until about 2008 mostly consisted of 2 special election opportunities and a primary and a general. In 2008, we had a total of 8 elections. 4 were unexpected due to vacancies created by the deaths of Stephanie Tubbs Jones and Fannie Lewis, and 2 vacancies in Cleveland Wards 1 and 6 from resignations. In 2010, we saw that trend continue, where we anticipated only 2 countywide elections, and we had 3 countywide elections, which then included a countywide primary for county council and county executive. In 2012, as of late Friday, we've also been presented with a 3rd countywide election, which would be a presidential congressional primary. In your handouts, I just put a few things in there, and I'm going to make a few comments that are relative to this graph sheet. And I did a comparison. We did a comparison of actual versus actual costs in odd years, odd-like election years. So we compared 2007 to 2011's estimate total. We also then took a comparison of 2008 to 2012 and 2009 to the 2013 budget. Since 2007, our latest 4-year cycle, you can see that as we stabilized operations and the voting system, our resource needs in general stabilized and also have decreased. We've stabilized operations now and now understand how each election resource need presents itself. So we actually have a template that we can now follow so that if, for example, on Friday they say you have an additional countywide election, we can predict out fairly accurately, actually very accurately, how much that countywide election will be based on stabilization of operations and now knowing how to plug in the numbers in terms of getting total cost. And I think that those graphs show that on the top for total expenditures, and then the bottom graph, we included that so that you could see how the like election cycles are decreasing in terms of staffing needs as well. So as operations stabilized, procedures and processes improved, our staffing needs as well as fiscal needs went down. For the 2012 summary budget, I will again just remind you that my comments really are reflective of 2 countywide elections. But again, as of late last Friday, we now have a 3rd countywide election, which will take place in June. And that will be an approximate cost of $3.1 million, in addition to the 2012 budget that's been allotted to us of $22.7 million. So it's $22.7 million plus $3.1 million, but at the end of next year, the state will reimburse us for that 3rd countywide election. So although you're fronting us the money, we are due to get those dollars back based on actual costs. The biennium, this biennial budget is unique in that 2012 is a presidential election year, and then 2013 is the largest municipal election year due to the City of Cleveland primary. So we will compare those years going forward in our comments to 2008 and 2009 respectively. The $22.7 million 2012 budget reflects the anticipated expenses for 2 countywide elections, including 6,800 election day workers for each countywide election, approximately 904 temporary workers to supplement our staff, and a lot of that is due to a growing in-house voting system that we have now during presidential elections. In 2008, we served over 50,000 people in-house at the Board of Elections in the 35 days prior to the election day. It also includes the cost of 2.8 million ballots for election day, absentee in-house voting, and vote by mail. That would also go up to potentially a 3-page ballot. And then for 2013, the $18.5 million 2013 budget reflects the anticipated expenses to conduct 7 elections, including 1 countywide in the municipal election year. Although you asked in the materials that we received about changes in operations that were not in previous budgets, and although we don't have new initiatives that we're embarking on, this is going to be the first presidential election year, where you will see efforts over the last 4 years, operational stability efforts reflected in a downturn in resource need. And those include 2009 re-precincting process, where we went from 1,468 precincts to 1,066. We combined voting locations from 575 down to 437. We combined, municipal primary elections from, we had up to 13 elections in 2007, based on individual charter communities having different primary elections in September and October, and we've combined them all down to one fall election, with the exception of 2 cities, one of which is on the ballot this November, to eliminate or move their primary election date. The vote by mail program also has provided many changes, and we also have bilingual expenses now. So these are not just reductions, but this is a varying degree of reductions as well as additional expenses. The bilingual program over the last year and a half, since November 2010, has cost us approximately $230,000 additional dollars to go from English ballots to bilingual ballots and everything else bilingual. Signage, pamphlets, whatever we have that a voter sees is now bilingual. And one of our I think biggest accomplishments is the fact that our voter registration database now, I think, more accurately reflects the actual number of voters that we have in Cuyahoga County due to, a massive cleanup things that we did of the registration system, including cleaning up over 93,000 duplicate records between Cuyahoga County and the 87 other counties, and doing the national change of address cancellation process, which this year alone, we took off of our rolls 100,000 voters who had no voter activity in the last 4 years. I don't have any other comments to present, so if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Questions by my colleagues? Ms. Conwell?
Director, so going forward, will you contemplate on possible additional elections? How will you go for, how will you look at that? You know, you stated that you, due to 2 deaths, you hadn't looked at that in the past. Is there going to be some kind of margin that you hold, or if that should occur again, you know? Right.
We actually would come back to you in the need for additional funds. We don't put that or project out unanticipated elections in our budget, just because it's very costly. In fact, next year we won't have any special elections due to the presidential primary and the new legislation for the third for the third countywide election eliminated the August primary. And any city that wanted to go to a special election in August can now go on the June ballot. But normally we would have asked for dollars projected out for special elections, and we didn't do that even this year had we had special elections. So in the case of a death or a resignation that causes an election, or in the case of a school district that in 2013 wanted to go to a school district levy for August, we would actually come back to you and ask for more dollars if needed.
One other question through the chair. Ballots returned in the November 2011. Why do we have a cost for the ballots returned? I thought we...
I'm not entirely sure where you're looking. What document are you looking
November, this is your second page,
This vote by mail document?
Page, yeah.
Okay.
Your vote by mail program summary. Under November 2011 budget, there's a cost down there for balance returned. I thought that was put over to the taxpayer now.
We are not actually putting out envelopes with postage on them any longer. The 2011 budget was actually projected out prior to that non-postage element coming into play. So you do see numbers in there, but we are not paying for that. And in fact, there on the bottom is the show, just showing that exact amount as a savings from not paying the postage in the yellow highlighted portion.
20,000 off, so. Okay.
Actually, okay. And we projected out 2012 and 2013 just to essentially show you what the savings would be from not paying for postage on applications and ballots. It's not that we are putting them in our budget request. We're not. We're just showing you what the savings are.
Okay, it's Councilman Greenspan and then Rogers.
Just a real quick statement, or not statement, question. In the budget book we have, one of the last sentences, we know the issue regarding the mailing of absentee ballot requests, and that's not happening and so forth. But it says the mail will be replaced by a public outreach effort. Is that referencing the effort of the executive, or is the Board of Elections doing something else? And if so, what cost does that have?
I'm not sure where you're seeing that on what document, but we don't have a voter outreach campaign with a dollar amount attached to it. And we did not, for this election, is it for 11 that you're talking about?
Well, it just says, there's a semicolon, it says the mailing will be replaced. I'll read the whole sentence.
Okay.
This eliminates the county's financial obligations in sending out the mailings as originally planned. That's semicolon. The mailings will be replaced by a public outreach effort to make sure that Cuyahoga County voters understand how to vote early this fall. So am I to assume then, because this is the executive's budget, that those are statements from the executive and not from the Board of Elections?
I don't know where that's coming from. If it's from the Board of Elections, I'm not recalling having that on documents. But I can tell you that we have used some funds just recently to put a postcard out to just under 240,000 voters who has historically voted by mail. That was decided by our board about a week and a half or so, 2 weeks ago almost. But we did not, as a result of not being able to pay postage or not use vote by mail funds to send applications out, we did not then produce this massive voter outreach effort that had a lot of dollars attached to it at all. Anything that we've done so far has been basically at the, media's been very helpful in getting the word out and such, but I'm struggling even to think of anything else that we've paid for other than the postcard.
Okay, and Mr. Chair, and those numbers, that's a $71,871.
Yes,
that's
it
listed
is on that, yes.
on that page.
71,800, yes.
And that decision was a Board of Elections decision.
Correct.
And that program was sponsored by the Board of Elections. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, Councilman Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question. I know that we're supposed to stay on the budget, but since it came up, the vote by mail program, I did have some residents call me saying that they had received their ballot in the mail, or they'd received their ballot applications in the mail, and there were two sets of instructions on there. One that said that they needed to place a stamp on, and another set within the same thing saying that they did not need to place a stamp on. I'm wondering if you're aware of that, if that's been corrected.
Yes, that was corrected days after the very first ballots actually got sent out. Unknown to myself, there was a pamphlet that was included that did say, and it was used from last elections where we did pay for the postage. Within a matter of probably 2 to 3 days after the first mailings were going out, we actually pulled those, we put new instructions in, and there is a colored sheet of paper that says that the ballots do cost 64 cents. So those would have been very early on.
Did those people that received the misinformation, were they contacted, or did they receive any?
We did not recontact those voters.
About how many people would you say?
I don't know the answer to that. I could get it for you if you'd like.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. And then my second question is regarding municipal elections if a municipality or school district decides that they want to put a levy on at a time where there's nothing else scheduled. I thought it was on them to come up with the money for those
It
elections.
normally is, but my understanding is that the legislation that was passed last week allows for municipalities to go on the June ballot next year at no cost to the municipalities.
Right, okay, so if
But
they
that's a
decide to do
special-
something other than
Yes.
the June, then it's up to the municipality to come up with the funds to pay for that election.
The, if they wanted to go to a special election, correct.
Okay.
They could put it on, I don't want to, never mind. I don't know if my next statement was going to be accurate, so I'm going to withhold that. And I would
Okay.
be happy to get you additional information on that particular point in the event, so for example, if they wanted to go on the March election, I don't know what the funding situation is for that. I don't know what was included or not for the legislation. I think they only spoke for the June primary.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Director, when this legislation was passed last Friday, it was stated that the state was going to pick up the cost for the June election. Are you confident that that they're not going to pass any of that cost down to the counties?
Well, I have not had any conversations where I've been assured that there wouldn't be further legislation differing from what was passed Friday. Based on the legislation that was passed, I do anticipate being fully reimbursed for the primary election in June. We had a situation where we had special elections in 2008, and we were reimbursed as they had said. So I do not anticipate any deviation from that.
And do we have to wait till the following year for the reimbursement?
We would have to wait until the election is over and more than likely the following year.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much. We will now move on to Paul Elsinas to present on the County Planning Commission, another budget that we could spend all evening on talking about issues not related to his budget, so please don't do that. Mr. Director.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, good evening. I know you've had a long day, and I heard the admonition to be brief, so let me quickly take you through some broad trends in the County Planning Commission's budget. But first, I want to introduce Claire Kilbane and Jennifer Carafa of our staff as well, who have been working on this presentation and do all the good work over the year on our budget and other financial matters. Revenues. Let me just quickly talk about revenues. We have 4 sources of revenues that come to the Planning Commission: contracts with municipalities for actual work. Right now we have 9 communities and 9 projects under contract, with several more that we expect to be contracts consummated in the near future. We also receive intergovernmental funds. That's for administering state programs, such as the State Issue 1, Issue 2 Public Works Program. We receive an administrative fee for doing that. Third category is grants, philanthropic and governmental. And finally, the general fund. And so I know you have the information in front of you about the trend lines for the general fund. And every year since 2008, we've had a decline in our general fund appropriation, slight uptick predicted for this year, but as the briefing information in the budget book explains, that has to do with some adjustments for 2010 and billing and when we receive the revenue. So I think that the general trend of annual decline in general fund appropriations is still holding. Expenditures are largely driven by staffing, and since 2002, when we had 26 employees, not FTEs, but employees of various status. In 2007, we were down to 22, and today we have 19 employees, 16 full-time employees, and 3 in part-time status. So you can tell from that our expenditure side is affected by that staffing expenditure. So what are we doing with the money that we do receive? And what you've had just handed out to you is our 2011-2012 work plan with priorities indicated. That's a result of a process of engaging our board this past spring. And so the priorities you see, the extent of the work plan is there for you to, if you have any thoughts or questions about it, we'd be happy to answer those as well. So one thing that is not in the listing there, because it's a fairly new project, a new area for us to work on, which is the work that we've now started a few months ago with 4 communities in the southeastern part of the county, Moreland Hills, Orange, Pepper Pike, and Woodmere, and the county executive's office, to look at local government services collaboration, possibly consolidation, and possibly merger. We think this is a really important, potentially very impactful part of the work that the Planning Commission is helping to administer and support. And then finally, I just want to say, when you look at that work program, that in fact we have, based on sort of trying to understand better the impact the Planning Commission work is having, just in the financial area, we have begun this year, in 2011, in the spring of 2011, to put together what we call a leveraging document. And we've taken every element of the work plan and tried to identify directly how much we receive in outside revenue, and also the other investment, public and private, that may result from our doing the work. And we've just taken one cut at it, but I can tell you with a straight face that the leveraging is well over $150 million. So it's a pretty good ROI for the staffing that we do. And we look forward to doing that into the future. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions by my colleagues? Councilman Greenspan.
Just 2. The 4-city merger study, how much do you think you've put fiscally, financially into that study? If you had to allocate, put a dollar number to that.
Councilman, thank you for the question. We have assigned existing staff resources up to now into doing the work of the merger. We have 3 staff people who have been putting an incredible amount of time over the last 3 or 4 months to try to figure out sort of the first scoping with the communities, the initial phases of the study to get it scoped and ready to go. We expect to go to the 4 communities and to Ed Jers, who represents the county executive, in December with a very detailed scope of work. So therefore, basically, it's county general fund money that has been supporting that effort to date. Beyond that, we know we're going to have special expertise when you get into all of the really complicated and extensive aspects of local and municipal operations. So we know we're going to have subject matter experts. And thus far, largely through the work of Ed Jers and Emily Lungard, we have received a $34,000 NOACA grant out of the regional benefits account. So we expect to use that money for the work in the study. And once we have pulled together the detailed scope, we will have a budget and hope to attract funding, particularly from the governor's $45 million local government innovation fund. We know the governor's office is interested in what's happening here in Cuyahoga County, and we expect to go to Columbus, and once we have the detailed scope of work, to ask for more funding.
So the number of, so now we know the funding that you're working on, the 3 people, or county general fund dollars. What would the value of that be from inception to the end of this year till you prepare your plan?
We have not calculated those dollars. We have that in our timesheet payroll system. We can get those numbers for you. And I'd hesitate to actually give you a number, but the 3 primary people is myself as the sort of the interim project manager, Chris Hopkins, who heads up our community planning functions, and Marionette Richardson Scott, who has supported a lot of the work that we do in multiple programs. And I will tell you that we have had many meetings out in the community, in the 4 communities, and we have 60 hours of tape from interviewing all the major the executive teams of each of the cities, the fire chief, police chief, service director, law director, and so on. And we have to take that and extract from it some current definition of what we think the communities are doing in services on the way to that discussion about how those 4 communities together can seek opportunities to become high-performance, cost-efficient local government. And so I'll give you that answer, but I cannot tell you what that number is.
In the aggregate, it's safe to say, between now, when you began, and the end of the year, it's in excess of $100,000.
I think so.
Okay. Just the next question has to do with regional collaboration. So what is your relationship with Ed Juris, and how are you guys working together?
Two forms of interaction with Ed. Ed is also on our 11-person board, as is Councilman Simon on behalf of the County Council. So we have that interaction with Ed, but more importantly, Ed is a constant attendee and a part of the team that is going and visiting. For example, once a month we have progress meetings with the mayors, and Ed and Emily are always there. So we have a lot of really close stuff. Just recently, a week and a half ago, was the Efficient Gov Now conference in Akron, which Ed and others have helped to organize, and we were part of the panel talking about mergers as well. So that's a very specific example of ongoing relationship with Ed.
Okay. Anything else? Councilman Germana.
Through this, let's call it exercise of coordinating this, do you think you're going to be coming up with a system that will assist in other cities in the future? Because you'll have known what works, and care to comment on that as far as efficiencies in next generation of mergers?
Councilman, great question. That is not just our aspiration and the goal that Ed and the four mayors have going forward with this project, but I can tell you without fear of contradiction that because merger consolidation and that whole subject matter is really not well developed in Ohio, there are not many, there are merger studies that have been done throughout Ohio and throughout the country, but not many mergers have actually been implemented. And when you go through and try to unbundle why it is that there's been lack of success of moving from analysis to actual change in structure and contracts and intergovernmental relationships, that is a leverage point that we are really drilling into. One early finding that we have to your question is that there are at least 24 collaborations and shared use agreements that those four communities and their neighbors are currently in. We shouldn't assume that communities do not have, and I know this is true around the county as well. We shouldn't assume that the communities of this county have not over time already taken actions, indirectly, informally, informally, to try to leverage the resources and manage their current budget issues. So just cataloging all of those relationships. So for example, 8 communities in the southeastern part of the county and Geauga County have a public safety arrangement there already for dispatching around Chagrin Falls Village. So in a council of governments, that's one example, one of 24, 25 that we've already surfaced in our interviewing. Already there are 8 communities that have formed a council of governments for dispatching and safety communications. So that's one example. We intend to catalog all that, find the best practices, find best practices from outside the area, and communicate those robustly to the other communities in Cuyahoga County.
Okay. Anything else? Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Alcinas, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I see in the budget performance that you don't expect to collect all of your planning service charges for the year due to inability or slow collection from the municipalities. What is
combination of factors, Councilman, great question. This has to do with our staffing arrangement internally and a shift that occurred, not to get into the minutiae in the interest of time, but when early retirement happened in 2002 for our planning agency, our business function person took early retirement. We, to save money, because we co-located at the time with the Solid Waste Management District, shared a fiscal operation person for that reason. We shared, 2 county agencies are sharing a one fiscal business administrator. Well, the folks from the Solid Waste District have moved from our space out to Garfield Heights to the Solid Waste Convenience Center, so we lost that relationship. So that was one issue. The other issue has a lot to do with our actual software program for the way that we do our timekeeping and how that timekeeping connects to a billing application, so that all the people who work on a project, their time gets collected and billed to a community. We've had some struggles with that software program as well, so that's inhibited. And then finally, at the end of the day, it's it's a tough environment out there, but we do ultimately collect all the funds that we're due for our consulting work, for our municipal work.
So it's actually internal?
It's internal. Yeah, it's county internal, our agency internal, yes.
Not the municipalities failing to pay?
No, municipalities have been good about that. Some are better than others, but ultimately we all make sure the books balance.
Okay.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, one final question. On your work plan for economic competitiveness, what type of monies are you investing in the biomimicry?
Thank you for the question, Councilman. One of the elements in the county's, in the plan that the county council adopted, the county economic development plan, is the topic around clusters and economic development clusters and emerging clusters. Biomimicry in particular is mentioned as one of those emerging clusters that can have transformative economic effects for Northeast Ohio. I will not bore you with the details in the interest of time, only to say that our agency, because of the work we were doing in sustainability, began with others in this community, put biomimicry, just for everyone's quick overview, what is biomimicry? It's an emerging discipline that is affecting dramatically globally product development and a whole bunch of other ways of taking from the 3.8 billion years of nature's genius, nature has evolved, and the planet's evolved over that time, and connecting it to actual economic and activity and solving human problems. We got connected to the fountainhead of this biomimicry discipline, and now Northeast Ohio, Cuyahoga County, is one of 3 places on the planet where the Biomimicry Guild, the folks who have figured this new kind of a transformative way of mining nature's genius, there are 3 places in the world where they're going to expand, and Cuyahoga County is #1 on their list. South Africa and the Netherlands are second. Country of Japan, Portland, Oregon, other places are in second and third place in this scheme of things. So we as an agency have spent some time going back about 3 years with the full approval of the then county commissioners and their encouragement to continue to proceed with doing this work on biomimicry. We hope to have you hear more about it because it really could have transformative economic development consequences for Cuyahoga County.
Okay. One more question. On the Mill Creek project and the 9 municipalities that border the Mill Creek, are you charging them for these services, or are they paying?
No, Councilman, no. We have, the 9 communities that share the Mill Creek watershed from Orange Village, Pepper Pike, right down to the Cuyahoga River through Cuyahoga Heights. That staff work has been part of our Cuyahoga Valley initiative, for which we had obtained funding from the commissioners and $500,000 from the Gun Foundation about 4 years ago. That's the money we're using for that general work, and also some general fund work in order to bring together those communities around that great resource of Mill Creek and economic, social, and natural systems development.
Can you give me a dollar amount of what type of dollars
I will get you one. I don't have one right offhand, but I will get you a number this week.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. We need a break. I had hoped to go straight through, but it's been 2.25 hours. It can't be a 20-minute break like the last one. Please be back before 4:45, or 4:45, rather. We're in recess.